Hello, my name is Hannah Hemberger, and this is my Module 12 Case Study Review presentation for EDL 851, Teacher Reacts Negatively to Teacher Evaluation. In summary, for this case study, the principal realizes the deadline for teacher evaluations is quickly approaching, so he is finalizing his observations and paperwork. He notices he does have one teacher, Mrs. Stevens, who is having difficulty in the classroom with student involvement and motivating students in general. He has had one sit-down meeting with her to discuss her areas of improvement, but she did not take them well. He goes back to observe again, and she hasn't changed anything in her classroom that he suggested to her, so he decides to check her as do not rehire on her evaluation. She does not take this lightly and threatens to go to court if he turns in the evaluation to the superintendent as is. In building professional capacity, we must foster relationship with others that are around to create an environment that is successful and conducive to the learning of others. I believe that this is something that is not happening right now with this teacher and this principal, and that they are not building their relationship, their trust with each other, and their well-being. So we have to make sure we have all three of those in place. And when I mean relationships, taking an interest in that person, finding out similarities and differences, all of that should have happened before he got to that point of do not rehire or suggesting areas of improvement for her and she didn't take them well. In turn, with trust, this goes back and forth. The teacher needs to trust the principal in what he's seeing and, take that into consideration, but then the principal also needs to trust the teacher in that she's doing her job, and if she's not, portraying that correctly. And then just in the overall well-being of their relationship built on trust, they need to make sure that they're helping each other out and being supportive of each other. And these are just some areas I don't feel like are happening within this relationship right now. Legal or ethical issues. Nobody has been harmed by the action or decision. The teacher is going to lose her job if the principal turns in the evaluation as such. The evaluation will go on her record and follow her to her next job. So this is not something that's just going to go away from this teacher. She will have it on her record, and in her next position, when she interviews, they'll ask, what happened at your previous position? They'll may call her previous school for references. And so it's not something to just take lightly and, going to go underneath the rug. Does the action or situation contravene an existing law? No, it does not. And there was not a breach of contract based on the information presented in this case, and there was no discrimination present. Synthesis. The school principal has decided to not renew his teacher, Mrs. Stevens' contract due to poor student involvement and engagement, and has experienced backlash from Mrs. Stevens, resulting in threats to take him to court. Here are the facts of the case study. The people involved are the principal, the teacher, who is Mrs. Stevens, and her classroom students. This is taking place at their school, in the teacher's classroom and in the principal's office where they have meetings. And for the program, it doesn't specifically say the area that she teaches, what grade level she teaches, or the curriculum, but we do know there is not much student involvement in discussions or motivation in class. There is too much teacher instruction happening, and there are student behaviors that are distracting from the lesson. So when the principal would walk by, he would see most of the students talking with each other, and there being a lot of noise instead of listening to the teacher teach. So could this conflict, the situation, or decision be damaging to stakeholders or the community? I think yes, it can definitely create a divide amongst the community for people that admired and appreciated Mrs. Stevens. So people find out she was not rehired. They don't understand why. They liked her. Then there's going to be other people that were like, yeah, she didn't deserve to come back. So you're creating just a natural divide right there. And then I think it's very damaging to the culture of the school and the relationships among the teachers and the students. So everybody's going to be talking about it and wanting to know what happened and just the reasonings why. And another divide. Some teachers might have felt like she did a really nice job and some didn't. And then, it's going to create all this apprehension with other teachers like, oh my gosh, this principal really means business and he's going to, not rehire me if I don't supposedly do what I'm supposed to do. The individuals and group that have an important stake in the outcome are Mrs. Stevens' students, the principal, and the staff at the school. At this point, not all relative stakeholders have been consulted. The superintendent has not been brought in on the issue to discuss it, and that would be like the next step that the principal should do. Can we learn more about the situation, or do we know enough? So most definitely we can learn more. We can learn about the school's non-renewal policy, the teacher evaluation protocol, plans of improvement, what time of the year this is happening at. Have there been other observations happening? Has this teacher observed other teachers? Has anybody else come in to observe the teacher? But all in all, I do feel like that there is enough information to make a decision on this case. So possible options for this case study. The first one is to take no action, and Mrs. Stevens continues teaching. So some consequences of this would be students will suffer, the principal will lose respect, and have an unsatisfactory teacher. And when I mean students will suffer, if she's not doing a very good job and her students are not making progress, that's something that the principal really needs to be looking at is the data. And if they're not, then if she continues teaching, the next students she have are going to suffer because they're not going to learn what they need to. But another consequence for that would be that Mrs. Stevens is happy and she gets to keep her job. Number two possible option is continue with the process of non-renewing Mrs. Stevens' contract. This could involve a possible court case, could have backlash from the community and or staff members, disgruntled students who liked her, but then the principal would get to hire a teacher to his liking and somebody that he feels is going to build culture within his school. The third option is put Mrs. Stevens on a plan of improvement for the following year with stipulations in place. So maybe Mrs. Stevens doesn't want to hear about her areas of weakness and holds a grudge all year, but she does get to continue teaching and is allowed the opportunity to improve on her skills. Within these options, here are the following pros and cons. So for number one, taking no action, and Mrs. Stevens continues teaching. There won't be any legal action by Mrs. Stevens, but I don't feel like that this is an ethical decision or fair to Mrs. Stevens and the staff. It's the job of the principal to evaluate teachers and provide suggestions and strategies and feedback for them on what they're doing right in areas that they may need to work on. And ethical is just, it's not right. If he knows something needs to happen and something's not going right, then no action is not really prevalent in this case. The second option, continue with the process of non-renewing Mrs. Stevens' contract. So this would build a more positive culture in that getting somebody in there that does want to be there and is doing a nice job. And it has student first thinking, so if the students aren't making progress or learning, this is thinking about them and getting somebody in that position that's going to help. The cons for this, though, is that there could be legal action, and Mrs. Stevens really wasn't given the support she needed to improve on those areas. The third option is putting her on a plan of improvement. Pros for this includes that she receives support that she needs for her areas of weakness, and the relationship is on the mend. So yes, we have issues. Here's how I'm going to help you because I want you to be successful. I want you to be in this school, and you're already building up that relationship that's kind of teetering already because it's not easy to hear you're not doing good at your job. Cons of this would be that Mrs. Stevens could have a bad attitude all next year, knowing that she's on a plan of improvement, and it does create more work for both the principal and Mrs. Stevens. Choosing the best option. I feel like option 3, right, and for this case study is the best option, and that's putting Mrs. Stevens on a plan of improvement. I would make sure that I do this by presenting the facts along with the pros and cons of all the options, and then how I ultimately chose the best option, keeping in mind my students, the staff, and the community for which I live in. I would also make sure that I talked with the superintendent as well as the Board of Education about this decision, and making sure that they have my back and that they are on board as well. And then creative options, yes, Mrs. Stevens will get to strengthen her teaching skills while working on areas of improvement. And honestly, as a principal, this would strengthen my principal skills and leadership skills in evaluating teachers and the best way to go about providing feedback for them. Implementation of my plan would include, so I would plan a meeting with Mrs. Stevens to discuss her evaluation and present many positives with the areas of concern. If at this point I felt like I needed my superintendent present for the meeting, I would definitely invite them, but I think that I would start it off with just us two, and then if it was going south or not going well, I would have my superintendent on standby. I just feel like 2 versus 1 is just you're displaying more authority and more power over that teacher. So then I would introduce my plan of improvement that lists these specific areas for improvement and also get Mrs. Stevens' input on all the matters. So, she might have things that she, recognizes or sees or, hadn't really thought of. And if she's going to work on the improvement plan with me, then it's both of ours and, getting more buy-in from her to do a nice job this next year. So the areas for improvement, we should be looking at where we want to see them in a year. So telling her, this is where you're at for this area. This is where I want to see you in the classroom in a year from now. And then next comes in the strategies I'm going to give her to help the improvement in those areas. So this is where I see you, this is where I want to see you, and this is how I'm going to help you along the way. Determine the number of observations throughout the school year, both formal and informal, for Mrs. Stevens. Suggest that she observe her colleagues throughout the year and they observe her as well so that more people are getting in to see her and it's not just me and biased on my opinion and beliefs. The people that need to know about this plan include the superintendent, the Board of Education, and Mrs. Stevens, and then obviously myself as the principal. So knowing that these areas of improvement need to reach a certain level by the end of the next evaluation period, Mrs. Stevens needs to know that. If she doesn't reach that, or if she doesn't get, making progress, or say she even regresses, it could, if not, it could result in another year on the plan or even possible termination. But, I would just stress to her the importance that that's not what I want to happen and that I'm here for her and supporting her in whatever ways that she needs because I want to see her succeed. For my plan B, if she does refuse the plan of improvement, she could be terminated due to failure of meeting teacher expectation and requirements. And this would go with this to the superintendent and the school board as well. In closure, I put this pause method that I had actually created in one of our other assignments for providing feedback because I just feel like that a lot of this within this case study could have been alleviated and prevented from the beginning if these steps had been followed. And so just making sure that the principal is preparing data and artifacts, they're affirming the relationships with the teacher, understanding those relationships as well, searching for solutions both individually and together, and then executing and evaluating situations. And so this is how I wanted to conclude my presentation in that I feel like that this pause method really could have played a vital piece to alleviate the issues that came within this case study. Here are my references that I used from the pause method. Thank you for listening.